Well, thanks everybody. Excited to be here, excited to take part and help out. It's pretty cool stuff. And so I'm going to talk through a little bit about why we're here and what you can use Appsmith for, particularly with this hackathon, but moving forward. And that's really rapid prototyping. We've got a really great tool here. It's going to be very helpful. Probably be something that's going to solve some of the problems that you're going to be coming up against, make things really fast and easy for you. So let's talk about that. So first off, some of you might be wondering, what is Appsmith? Why is it great for prototyping? What are we going to do it with? And then how can it be used? And in fact, Joseph's actually going to do some building live for us. I'd like to leave a little bit of time though, because Joseph's kind of our mad scientist in chief and has been doing a lot of experiment with AI lately, building lots of little apps to test out different ideas, and even using ChatGPT to build apps for doing stuff with ChatGPT. Very meta, I know, fun stuff. So just real quick, we'll jump in. What is Appsmith? So Appsmith, this company we work for, is actually an open source tool. It's a platform that provides a series of integrated developer tools, lets you build out applications. And I like to say it's the front end for your back end. So Appsmith can be self-hosted because it's open source, but also we have a cloud version that's completely free. You can go log in right now today using Google or GitHub Auth and immediately get to work building and playing with apps. So that's why it makes such a great tool for prototyping and for hackathons. Easy, free, fast, what's not to love, right? So the way that you work with Appsmith is pretty simple. As I mentioned, there's a number of tools that we offer. They are all integrated. They all tie together to make it really fast and easy for you. So step one is you can build your UI. So we have a React-based tool that has a library of UI widgets. It's as easy as dragging and dropping them on the canvas, arranging them to build out the UI you want, everything from charts to modals, buttons, file pickers, audio recorders, as you can see there, which Joseph's put to good use here. And then each of these widgets can be completely customized, and you can write inline JavaScript in lots of different places to do all kinds of different creative things. Very flexible, very powerful, but fast. So you can spend time actually working on getting the pieces to work as opposed to worrying too much about what the front end looks like. Step two is connecting to your data. There's a great query build tool, as you can see here. We don't have, we're not going to dig into all of the specifics here, but as you can see, you can pass through headers, parameters, set options for authentication, and this supports typical APIs like REST and GraphQL, but also supports direct database integration, Postgres, Mongo, etc. There's also a number of native integrations for other tools like Airtable and things like that. But really, most of the time we find that the standard REST and database queries are going to be what you want. As you can kind of see here, we can also pass parameters from within the app directly to these queries. We can see the results coming back. Great stuff, really powerful, do server-side pagination, all kinds of good stuff. So now you've got a UI, now you've got a data, now you've got to tie the pieces together. And that's where you get to write some code. So there is a JavaScript IDE and debugger that's built in, and you can write code directly here, which is going to let you take operations on the data, combine data from different sources. It's going to let you kind of do pretty much anything that you need to do because it's all just straight JavaScript. Also, there is error logs and debuggers built in, and there's code linting and code correction. So if there's a problem with your code, it will tell you before you run it. And you can do this and run and build the code working, the functions and the methods working exactly as you want before you start to integrate them with the rest of the application, which is really, really handy. And then these can do all types of things and then can be bound, the data results can be bound to those widgets we had, which is really, really simple. 3 steps, very quick to build an application. And we'll see what that looks like here in a second. So why use it for prototyping? Why would this be interesting for you, especially in this case? Well, specifically because it's so fast. As I mentioned, you can log in and you can build and test a UI in really just a few minutes. You can connect to pretty much any data source you want. You can iterate rapidly. You can copy and clone things that are working, so you can try different experiments. You can delete what you don't want. And so very quickly get through and reach a high degree of functionality with your application. You can also connect to Git repo, which will let you use Git for versioning of your app, especially as you start to get something that you don't want to lose, you don't want to make a wrong move, you want to be able to go back with. And then one of the best parts is one-click share and deploy. So you can actually do password protected sharing if someone has access to the platform as well by adding them just individually, or you can make it public and then take that share and put it out there. So the platform provides everything you need for not only building, but also hosting the application right there in the system. Now, I don't want to take any time right now for questions. We will have time for questions at the end. Hopefully there will, once you kind of see in action how this goes, there'll be a lot more questions popping up, so we'll take a look. But at this point, I think it'd be great to jump in and take a look. And maybe, Joseph, I know I'm realizing I kind of jumped in a little too fast. You didn't get a chance to show off your craziness. Maybe you could do that real quick and show everybody what's possible in a very short amount of time.
Cool. Okay. Well, I've got a couple examples here ready. We'll do a quick demo of what can be built, and then we'll go into actually building something. And I'll start off here showing you a few of the latest experiments I've done. Just a second. Okay. Can you guys see this?
Yep. Looks good.
All right. And here we go. So this has a bunch of connections for ChatGTP, the different endpoints for chat completion, for file uploads, edits, moderation, and everything. And in this example, I kind of tied several different endpoints together. So I'm using an audio capture widget from Appsmith and want to send that off to be processed. And let's just ask it a question here. What is Appsmith? So it's translating the audio. It sends that, gives me back the text. Now it asks that question, sends that to ChatGTP to get a response. And then here's the text response.
Appsmith is a low-code development platform that allows users to build and deploy custom.
So it's got multiple things connected here, all in one. But if you wanted to just get an example of how the APIs are all connected, this shows you how to pass data from one to the next, push it into the next function, and just tie it all together.
So real quick, hold on a second, just can you go back for a second?
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious. So you're making you're using Appsmith to capture the voice and then passing the recording to an API to get the transcription, then passing the transcription into ChatGPT to get the response, and then passing the response into another library to generate the voice, which is then configurable.
Yep.
Is that right?
And, yeah. So once the text comes back, at that stage, I'm passing the text to an iframe and just using some vanilla JavaScript and the speech synthesis library to convert that text to audio. And to trigger it, I post a message from the parent app, Appsmith, into the iframe, so the two can communicate back and forth. And like one of the great things about Appsmith is you get all the pre-built widgets and you can do a lot of things out of the box with just a drag and drop widget. But if there's something that you can't do with those, you can just use an iframe and do whatever you want and then pass data back and forth from the iframe to Appsmith. So I'm doing most of it actually in Appsmith. This is our audio capture widget. But when it comes, and we have a widget that'll play audio back, but to translate it from text to speech.
Right.
You know, one thing I couldn't do natively in our platform, but it took me 10 minutes to set it up in an iframe. And now I can post.
How long would you say this whole thing took roughly for you to build?
So I did I did the majority of like the technical stuff in only an hour or two, like just to get the APIs connected. And then honestly, I spend most of the time just making it look decent.
Cool. Yeah, well, please keep going. This is awesome.
Okay, so here we have chat completion. so that you can ask it a question and get back the response and then continue that conversation. So you have to build up the conversation so that it has the full context. And every single time it's like you're asking a new question, but to get the response to seem, as if it's a continuation of a conversation, to do that, you just send the previous conversation. So instead of the request body having only the question that you're asking right now, so if you want to be able to add an additional prompt to it and get back, that continuing conversation, what I'm doing is building up that data in Appsmith, creating that array, and then sending it off again. And so the next prompt would be sent with whatever I type here, plus this, the additional thread that you've been working on. And so it really ties into the last presentation. He was doing everything with code and had some awesome examples integrated with ChatGTP. Now, if you want to throw together a quick UI and do those same types of functions, there's a lot of the same endpoints that he was using here, just with a UI that I've been able to throw together in just a few minutes. I see we've got a few questions in the chat already. Retool.
Yeah, I can
retool. Yeah. Well, no, that's a good question. So a couple of the big differences with retool, one of the things I really like about it is where you can write JavaScript, you've got a large editor where you can write multiple functions. And with retool, everyone's a separate file. And, you can have multiple functions, but each thing's in a separate file, and it's hard to just declare some variables and then write a couple of functions that are used together. So it's a lot easier to have your own custom code and tie those things together. We have multi-page apps and they have single-page apps, so you've got to link multiple apps together. But in general, it's the same approach. You can connect to any database or API and build front end quickly. So, okay, I'm going to show a few more examples here, and then we can get to some more questions. So for file uploads, if you want to process a set of data in ChatGTP, train a model, first you have to upload a file of JSON lines, where each line is a JSON object that has a prompt and a completion. And then you build up a set of JSON lines. So it's a little tricky to get the file format right so that the API will accept it. And I've got that stuff worked out here so that it's easy to just copy this app and then start passing in your own values. And so you can put together multiple prompts and complete these as keep adding in new JSON lines.
And so this is like training it.
Yes, and it actually gives you an interface for creating the file to be uploaded so that you can train on it. Because you can't just send it your random text file or CSV, right? Like first you have to, structure it in this format for this type of dialogue and the expected completion. And so here, now that I've built up a couple prompts, we can upload this as a new file. Let me give it a different name just so we can see it in the list. That's how lab demos usually go. Something has to break. 2 pages. I've got too many in here. Okay. So
yeah, if something doesn't break in the live demo, you shouldn't trust it.
Yeah. So now that you've uploaded a file, it's a status will initially be that it's being processed or, success, failure, whatever. Once you've got a file that has been processed, now you want to create a new fine tuning. So this will send that file into the list here so that you can add a new fine tuning that initially it's going to be in a state that's it's being processed, right? Once that's finally done, now you can use this model that's based on this set of prompts. And there's a weird issue where when you go to delete one, it still displays until the back end like refreshes. So I've linked to that issue here just to explain what's going on with that section. All right, so for edits here, I've got a couple random prompts. Sometimes this gives back some crazy stuff. So hopefully we get something decent here. I got a line from a song here. Want it reworded to sound like an official letter from the government. I had to add, don't use any profanity because I got back some weird stuff before. So it's a similar format. You send it a text string and then some way to modify it. Either this is the completion or this is how I want you to reword it or whatever it is. Okay, a little long, but so the solar systems ending. There's 4 expiring in the next 4 billion years. Yeah, and then you can use this to reword something that you're working on. You could pass in a student essay, whatever it is. So this interface just shows how the APIs are connected, and then how you would capture the input, send it off, and get it reworded. Again, I got to be careful with the next one here. There's a lot of things that could set off this moderation, but very few that I'm comfortable typing in live here. So I came up with a couple examples. If you don't recognize what movie this is from, then you have a homework assignment after this. So you got a phrase here, and it's somebody's threatening to saying prepare to die, and so that's going to get flagged for violence. And it shows you the score here, and you'll notice some of these are in exponential, so these are actually really small numbers here. The 7 is like way lower than the 0.9. And so let's do a couple more. So I tried the line, I shot the sheriff. That didn't set it off from Eric Clapton's song. So I changed it to I'm going to shoot the sheriff. This is future, shows intent that I'm planning on doing something, and that does set it off. Here's one from Harry Potter, talking about he's going to have a painless death, but he doesn't actually say he's going to do it. So apparently that's fine. I had another good one in here. Oh, the Borg. Yeah. So being assimilated by the Borg is okay. That's not violent, apparently. Yeah. And there's all these are violent. I couldn't really come up with an example that was going to set anything else off that I felt comfortable doing live here. So you guys can test that one on your own. Okay. So I think that gives you a decent idea of what can be done with Appsmith and connecting that to different APIs. So I wanted to show a couple different things that can be built, how we'd go about building it. This is just a simple CRUD app connected to SQL data source. So you've got a table view of the data. I've got it set up to have a query that runs on the server side. So it's passing in this query and actually getting back a different response instead of just filtering the existing data set that's on the client side. You've got a form to upload and edit data, refresh it, and there's another input form for for adding a new row. And so if you were building all this from scratch, it might take you even at a platform like this where you've got the drag and drop UI. It's still a decent amount of setup, especially this filtering on the query here. But in Appsmith, we have a feature to generate a page from a data set. And so I'm going to add a new page. And if you generate from data, then you can pick an existing source. And this could be a Google Sheet. It could be a Postgres, Mongo database, lots of different connections that you've already set up, or you could connect a new one right now. I'm going to go ahead and use this users table. And then you can optionally select a field that you want to filter on. So I was using the name before. I'll use the email this time. And just like that, it's going to generate you an app that's got, and of course, something has to fail in the live demo. I think the select query ran before the app was done loading there, but it does have data here. It's got the table connected to the select query. I'm searching on the email this time. Let's, yeah, okay. So it's filtered. It's connected the filter field from the table to the query. This is where it gets. It's really saving you a lot of time. It's crazy that it can just sense the table structure, figure out the columns, create all these bindings, and now there's a where clause for the email field that's checking to see if the input is like or if it's blank. So if there's nothing in there, and all this is done for you out of the box. It's already got pagination set up to the table here, so I can get multiple pages from this data set, and it's triggered by clicking. So you can go and build all this stuff one widget at a time, and you can get really creative and type in, different functions that run. This would be a great time for my lawn guy to show up. Huh? I hope you guys can't hear that too loud right outside my window. Okay, so if we wanted to build something like this from scratch, though, let's start another page. So we can drag in a table widget. And now there's no data connected right here, but it comes preloaded with some dummy data. And so the next step is, we've got to add a query. So new query. Where are we going to add it from? Let's use this users data set here. And if you want, you can just pick what type you want, and it's going to have a template for you. Or you can just start typing from scratch here, but without any coding. I've already been able to just click on a data set, say I want to select query. Now there's the query, and I already put a table widget on the canvas, but I'm going to use this just to show you. You can select from over here, and it does the binding for you. So this one now is connected to that query, but if I wanted to connect this one, I'll do it manually. So we'll clear this out. You type a couple of the curly braces there so that you can start typing JavaScript. And then we just reference that query that we just created. So query 1.data. All right. And if you wanted to filter or sort it yourself, like you could do that here and do it on the client side, or you can end up binding this input to the query back here, like we did in the auto-generated one. So if I wanted to add the where clause, I could do that here. But let's do an example of filtering it on the client side instead. So for this data, let's do a filter on it. And we want to filter the rows where the row dot name, let me use, let's see, I'll do something that I'll do like the gender where it's easy to type, something, a value that I know. So if it equals, and then the thing that we want to compare it to is the search text in table 1. So for table 1, sorry guys, can't type and talk at the same time. There's a search text property. And if the search text property equals whatever that row is, but now there's nothing in there when it's blank. So we'll just add an or operator or blank. Oh, or that equals. Or, and I could use a list here. If it's in this list, that would probably be a little cleaner. Let's see if that or gender equals blank. Obviously, my live abilities here aren't that great. Okay, I got a issue with my or here, r.gender. You get the point. Yeah. So let's see, we've got the generated CRUD page. You can connect to a SQL query. We could import a curl request if you wanted to create a new API that way. This is great for API docs. Like you can go to whatever you're trying to integrate with, Shopify, HubSpot, whatever, and just copy the curl request from their docs, paste it in here, and then change a couple values so that you can start running that query and display the results in a table. So let's see. Do we have any questions here? Something in the chat?
Not right here, but I think we've got a few minutes left. Can you take a look behind the scenes on one of those the Chat GPT?
Sure.
Because I'm curious to see how you built those out.
Yeah, so let's do this one since it's a little more complex. Just it has more examples in it. And so with this one, there's really only 2 APIs. The file upload one has way more. I'll show you that next. But to start this one, it all starts with recording some audio. And so what do you want to happen after the audio has been recorded? There's this trigger for the widget properties of the audio recorder here. So when the recording is complete, run this JavaScript function. And there's tons of other things here. You can select a query, select which function you want it to run. So I'm telling it to run in JS object 1, send audio prompt. So let's go check that out. Okay, and so this is the async function that orchestrates all of this, passing the data back and forth. Because it's a little slow to do the multiple steps, I have a couple alerts in here to let the user know what's going on, that things are working. So first I just say I'm translating the audio. I clear the value because that's being displayed in the iframe, and I don't want like the old one still there, so I'll clear it. Convert the, I've got a function that converts the captured audio, which is just a binary stream that I want to have like turned into a full file with a file name. And so this does that section. I'll show you in a second. Then I run the translation with the audio file. With the result of that, show another alert that now we're going to take the translated audio file, which is now text, and send that as a prompt. And then once I've got that prompt, I want to update the web page, the iframe, the part that is at the very end and converts the text back to speech. And so if all that works, then I post a message to the iframe to trigger it to play. And I just started this demo 2 days ago, barely had any time to work on it. So right now, the only function I have is to play the audio. What I'd like to do really is like post in different messages and say play, pause, stop, clear, whatever.
Right.
But right now, to get some message posted, it starts playing the audio.
Will we be able to export this so that other people can import it and play around with it?
Yeah. Yep. I could share the app itself just like as a user, but that would put a ton of load on my particular API key, but I can export the app definition, you guys import it, and then you can put in your key and take it from there. So
awesome.
We'll look at the API. So this is more of the JavaScript side. Let's look at one that's got a bunch of APIs. When you want to create a fine tuning, it takes the body from this training file. So when you send off to create a fine tuning, you have to tell it what file to use. Well, I'm passing in the value from the triggered row of the table 1. You'll notice that it shows the evaluated value here, but when I hover on it, there's nothing there because triggered row means that object only happens, it only exists when the user clicks something, and now there is a triggered row. And so this isn't populated. If I change this to selected row, then you see that there is an evaluated value because there's a row selected on the table. So, sorry. Get this back to triggered row. And so when you click a button to take one of these files that's been uploaded and tell it to make a fine tuning, that button here is a new column that I added to the table. You'll notice how it has a delete button, whereas the others don't. These columns are part of the data of the table, whereas this delete button is one that I added down here. You can add a new column and tell it that you want this new column to be a button or an icon button or whatever. And then what do you want it to do when you click this button? And you can tell it upload a file and then check for new files so that you can see it in the table. Or you could say run some JS function. So it's easy to like start out with the raw data displayed in a table and then add some custom functionality. This one's a button. I might add a different one where it just does a calculation. You know, it could return text or it might return a number or whatever, but you can compute what it is using something from the current row and then say, take the current row, whatever, name, index something, do some math on it, run it through some other function. So you can add buttons or calculated values to your table and then build interactions off of that. It looks like we are a little over time. Is there any other last questions we should address here? To show nested JSON and Appsmith. You know, I've done that a few different ways. We don't have a widget specifically made for it, but you can use a table widget. I think I did it on the moderations one right here. Sorry, this one. Okay, so this is a table widget displaying data, which is actually one row. The API is returning a single row of data, and it should be, you know, just columns across for each one of these values. But I'm just using a JavaScript function to rotate the data and take that one row and turn it into multiple rows so I can use the table widget. Now, another approach could be to, instead of having to manipulate the JSON first, you could display it in an iframe using a library that's made for a JSON viewer. And there's plenty of them. I've experimented with a few of those. I don't have one handy right now, but I can show you this object to rows just takes an object and returns, it just keeps concatenating. So the return value is property is whatever value you're on. And then the value is go to the object, get that, you know,
right.
Keep. And so it just builds a set out of that. Like I said, a couple different ways. The iframe is always like a escape hatch.
And can you
also
show Joseph on the libraries real quick?
Sure. Let's
that we
see.
can add custom libraries?
Yep.
I guess you're
In the-
using one already.
So this one's a better example. I've got some nested data here. I'm going to flatten it when I send it to this Google Sheet and also add in an ID using UUID JS library. So when I save a contact from this source, which is the random user API, back to the Google Sheet here, you can see it's added in a unique ID. Now that's coming from, I've added a library here. I've got quite a few extras. So Appsmith ships with 4. There's Lodash, Moment, XML parser, and Forge. But then you can add all these other libraries with just a click, or you can try different NPM libraries. It doesn't support all of them, but as long as it's not trying to update the entire DOM or the window of Appsmith itself, most of those tend to work. If it works best with like a minified link. So I found with the UUID one, that's already here. There's a good link for it. Sometimes you've got to find one that works, like the JS PDF one. I added myself and found the link for that. But once you've added them, it'll tell you how to access it. You know, this one's available as chart, UUID right here. So this object now, this reference to the entire library is being used when I create a row in the Google Sheet. And so if you look at the body for this, most of them are coming from the table 1. It's just whatever row got triggered, I pass in that property. But when it comes to the ID, I just call that library and say generate.
We are like way over time. Can you take like 30 seconds and show the iframe? There was a question about how the iframe works.
Sure. And let's see. Okay, so this iframe is using this speech synthesis, and I found an example online that somebody had written. So I took that and put their code in a variable here. I use a function to return the variable instead of just declaring it and calling the variable, because I needed to update with some template literals that are merged in. It's not much. There's just one little spot here where I populate the text area of the speech. The way that when I found this example, it had a text area and you could just type into it and click play or pause, whatever. And so I'm populating that little snippet, that section of it with my input text. And not the only binding. That's about it. I added this event listener so I can post a message and then tell it to speak from outside the iframe back into it. But I barely changed anything. I copied and pasted their code in here, added that little binding for the data, and then I tell the iframe that its source is that function. And back here in the JS function that operates everything, it's, let's see, text to speech right here. So after I've gotten the audio and transcribed it and set off the question and gotten back the answer, then I tell it to run this function that merges together the text and puts in the text of the text to speech, and then post a message to it to play it. So, okay, I know we're way over time, guys. Sorry about that.
That's awesome. Any other questions? Hopefully this was helpful to show how you can use Appsmith to rapidly prototype and build apps. And as Joseph has showed, interacting with AI APIs is a lot faster and a lot easier when you've got a tool set like this. So hopefully you guys can go build some fun stuff.
All right, appreciate it, guys. Thanks.